Good morning, everyone. My name is Kelly Caulfield, and I'm the Executive Director of the Common Sense Institute here outside of Denver. And for those who don't know, the Common Sense Institute is nonprofit, we are nonpartisan, and we are dedicated to the protection and the promotion of the Colorado economy. We are guided by an amazing board of directors. You can see their faces here representing a variety of industries critical to the Colorado economy, and we appreciate their guidance as we do our work. Common Sense Institute is conducting over 95 studies a year, and we do that through our amazing group of bipartisan policy fellows. Hopefully you all know many of them. They are the go-to resource in Colorado on the topics that they study. And I am so excited that Peter Lafari, one of our wonderful fellows, is the author of the report that we're talking about today, which is Unlocking Housing Affordability in Denver, a deep dive on inclusionary zoning. Is it helping or hurting the Colorado economy? Housing, I believe, is our most important issue that we are studying. It is impacting everyday Coloradans who cannot afford to buy or rent in Colorado, and it is decreasing our competitiveness. Before I introduce Peter Lafari and Chris Brown, who I will turn it over to, I wanted to just mention two quick housekeeping items. First, this report that we're briefing you on today, it is live on Common Sense's website, and you can find our website at www.commonsenseinstituteco.org, and you will be able to find all of this great research there. The other item I wanted to flag, please hold your questions until the end. Please drop your questions into the chat, and I will facilitate those questions at the end of today's conversation. This is also being recorded, and we will be sharing that out with all of you afterwards. So, Peter Lafari, for those who don't know, Peter is Common Sense Institute's longtime housing fellow. He is also a previous Terry J. Stevenson fellow studying housing affordability, a top issue for the Colorado economy. Peter is the Chief Executive Officer of the Maker Housing Partners, which is a housing authority very close to us in Adams County, Colorado. He was also appointed by the governor to serve on MIHA, that is the statewide Middle Income Housing Authority Board, and he is the chair of MIHA, which is a key decision-making entity for the state of Colorado in terms of housing. He's also the recipient of the 2023 NARO Outstanding Professional of the Year, and almost got it, was a 9 News finalist for Most Outstanding Leader of the Year. So we were really proud of Peter for being a finalist. I also want to introduce Chris Brown. This is Common Sense Institute's longtime Vice President of Policy and Research. He has been with Common Sense for 7 years, just this past weekend, and we have hugely benefited from his knowledge and expertise in healthcare policy, para, energy policy. He is the true driver behind much of the modeling and strong research that CSI produces. So Chris teamed up with Peter on this, and I can't wait to learn a little bit more. I think you'll be really blown away by some of the differences we're seeing across some of our largest cities in Colorado. The differences in how Denver and Aurora are handling housing are really dramatic. And I'll kick it over to Peter to talk about his report. Thank you again.
Thank you, Kelly. It's my honor and pleasure to be here, and thank you everybody for calling in today. There's many other places you could spend your time, but you decided to spend it with us, and for that we appreciate it. And so, as we all know, housing is far too expensive for the majority of Coloradans to be able to pencil out at their kitchen table, if they're even lucky enough to have a kitchen table to be able to sit at. And so wages have not been keeping pace with the cost of mortgages. As we can see here, although we've had a meaningful increase in wages of 44% over the last decade, the increase of hours required of work to afford the mortgage of an average priced home has shot up 176%. And so housing is rare. And with any sort of commodity, the more rare it is and the more desired it is, the more expensive it becomes. And so cities like Denver across the country are working diligently to find a policy framework, a policy ecosystem that promulgates the conditions based off of their regulatory decisions to allow home builders to produce our most foundational need. And so in Denver, one of the primary strategy is what's called an inclusionary housing ordinance. Denver has coined the term the expanding housing affordability, which aims to create mixed income communities by linking market rate housing to affordable housing units. And it requires that new housing developments with 10 or more units include a share of the units that are sold or rented to lower income houses. And you can see the matrix here. It also involves a pretty complex linkage fee construct impacting commercial developments as well. And so we can go to the next slide, Chris. And so what we found is that although even with the best intentions of Denver leadership and the experts that helped inform the EHA policy, it has had a material fiscal impact on a typical, and this is a current project that's being developed, is in pre-development in Aurora, as if it were go through the process in Denver. And so the idea here is that a market rate development can shoulder the burden of the inclusionary housing ordinance, the EHA fee structure, and still pencil out and still attract investors to be able to start, break ground, and then ultimately have grand opening and helps folks turn those units into homes. But as you can see here, the financial impact is influencing investor behavior. It is also requiring an increase of about $80 a month, which on renters for the same project if it were to be developed in Denver. And so these impacts have resulted in a 16% decrease in return on equity, as you can see there in our chart. And so, ultimately what this means is that investors are seeking out alternative localities to have their dollars be turned into homes. And so it has had a deleterious impact in the number of new housing starts basically since its implementation. And so I'm going to give it to Chris, and he can share some of our stark findings.
Great, thanks, Peter. So much of Peter's work has been focused on the question of housing supply and addressing the affordability crisis. So we took a look at permitting, the way that broadly across these markets we can keep track of how supply is responding to demand is again through permitting. When we look at permitting history, the rolling 6-month average in Aurora versus Denver, we can see that since the implementation of the inclusionary housing ordinance in Denver, there's been a 31% decline in Denver versus an 18% increase in Aurora. Between September and about May this year, so September 23 through May of 24, Aurora, which has about half the population of Denver, was actually outpacing Denver for monthly permits. But the evidence just between those two cities was not enough. We also took a look across some of our competing municipalities across the West, Boise and Salt Lake, and saw that, as there are a lot of other compounding issues impacting permitting broadly nationally, we wanted to examine again how Denver compared to some of these, competing cities. And while Boise and Salt Lake also saw similar declines as Denver, it wasn't as pronounced as we saw in Denver. So what we did is a statistical test, a difference test to examine the impact of permitting supply in Denver post-inclusionary housing ordinance, and found that Denver would be on average producing and supplying about 2,900 to about 3,200 more housing units a year, if not for the inclusionary housing ordinance. Currently, Denver is on track to permit about 4,600 units this year based upon the first 6 months of permitting. And so based on prior CSI work with Peter, we know that the reduction of between 2,800 and 3,200 units brings Denver below the level that is needed to close the supply gap and meet projected demand over the next 5 years. So let me turn it back to Peter to talk about some of the recommendations going forward.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And our housing affordability salvation is directly correlated to our housing abundance, and the lack thereof is the lack thereof. And so any sort of policy intervention that has a material impact downward on the ability for home builders to deliver our most foundational need needs to be highly scrutinized. And so we're recommending a reevaluation of EHA, perhaps a reduction of fees, a harmony with significantly increasing zone capacity. I don't know about you, but I think the kids call it gaslighting. When you ask Denverites who are very charitable with their tax revenue to invest in affordable housing, and that's something that we celebrate, to accomplish our housing affordability goals, but yet simultaneously we restrict to 23% of our residentially zoned land where home builders are permitted to build the most affordable and attainable housing types. All we have is the rising of cost of said 23% land and the homes that eventually, after an extremely long period of time, are built. And so we're also pointing towards some really exciting outcomes from San Diego that have demonstrated what happens when cities get super clear on what constitutes a total development application and how you can radically accelerate permit processes to be able to get units built in the time frame that constituents require them. And so we're of the opinion that if San Diego can have a target of 30 days, as we mentioned in the report, and then with results averaging around 9 days, why can't Denver? And so we're asking for Denver leadership and for stakeholders to take that same zeal and passion that has been deployed to address helping our unhoused community members find a home and put that into increasing our zone capacity, fast tracking our permitting processes, and give home builders an opportunity, both affordable, middle, and market, the ability to provide our most foundational need. Thanks, Chris. I think we're ready for some questions.
Great. Kelly here again. I'm not seeing anything in the chat. We'll give individuals a moment, but it looks like KDVR, do you have a question? Great. We'll just open it up to anyone who may have a question on Peter Lafare's report. Peter, is there anything else you wanted to add, given that some of our attendees may need another minute or two to generate a question?
Yeah, what we found is that that we understand that there is significant pressures on locally elected officials who embark on increasing their zone capacity by allowing more homes to be built where we traditionally and consistently only allow one. But with persistence and logic, what we find is that over time, these initiatives are embraced and then deployed. And so what we would do is we point to this in the report, is that where we see more homes allowed to be built than just one type of home. There's nothing wrong with single family home development. We are in full support of all types of homes. But if your target audience is how can we produce homes, at 400,000, 350,000, 300,000 and below, so that you have greater harmony with the mortgage capacity. That's other work that we've done here at the Institute, demonstrating there is a significant mismatch in Coloradans' mortgage capacity compared to the cost of homes. The cost of homes is driven by a lack of supply. And so if we look at Minneapolis, we look at Austin, Texas, what we find is if you do that important, yes, yet arduous work of allowing greater housing abundance, what we see is significant year-over-year declines in the average cost of rent and the average cost of new home production. And so we're urging Colorado leaders to embrace light touch, gentle density that is neighborhood friendly, and that often referred to as the missing middle, to give home builders the opportunity to provide those homes that Coloradans can afford, that at both for sale and for rent. And so again, when cities, specifically Denver, restrict to a de minimis percentage of their zoned land the ability to be able to produce those types of homes, it shouldn't be a surprise when we have home prices and affordability at the deep levels as we find them currently. And so we're asking Coloradans, we're asking Denver leaders to reevaluate their policy position of putting taxation measures alone at the forefront of their affordability strategy, and at a minimum, marry them with greater market condition increases so that homes can be delivered at those price points that we know Coloradans can afford.
Thank you, Peter. I think I would just add the bottom line for me is we are at a time where Denver Metro, our entire state, is trying to address housing affordability. And we are seeing, based on Peter's report, 3,000 fewer units per year, which we think is because of the inclusionary housing ordinances. It is decreasing permitting in Denver. It is down 30%. Whereas our neighbor Aurora is only down at a time when Aurora has increased their permitting by 18%. So there's something to learn here when it comes to inclusionary zoning. Aurora, it seems, is doing this in a way that is not decreasing permits and increasing housing abundance.
Yeah, Kelly, I'll also share on the fast tracking of permitting processes. We cite a very interesting and important study out of Washington State that demonstrates that for any project, any housing development project that is in review for longer than 6 months, for every month over 6, each unit cost increases by 1% per month. And so time is money. And money is very expensive at this point in time. And so the things that we were able to do and get away with during the pandemic and previously, and still attract investors and home builders, is not working today. And so we have to change the paradigm. We have to look at more voluntary types of inclusionary housing ordinance deployment, but we can't do it without increasing zone capacity and getting serious about fast tracking permit approvals, as we've seen in some of the vanguard cities that we cite in the report.
Great. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Chris. I don't think there are any other questions, so I will just wrap it up. We really appreciate you all joining us on a Friday morning. Our report can be found on the Common Sense Institute co.org website. We dropped in a link on the website, and we are available for any questions. You can contact our head of communications here, Cinnamon Watson, and we would be happy to get you an answer. Thank you so much.